Okay. I'm so sure you can see my screen now. Can you please confirm? Anyone? Thanks. Thanks. Just want to be sure. Okay. We are almost there. All right. So I'm just going to quickly confirm if the audio is actually working on LinkedIn and YouTube, and then we'll just start. So just give me like a minute to quickly do this. My phone don't hang.
Wow.
I don't know.
Has the guy not fixed it?
I think that was one of the issues we were having yesterday. So it looks like the phone will go back to him. Uh-uh. What is that? What about now? But I can see what's going on. There is actually a capture. Nothing. Okay, so that seems to be working now. All right, thank you. In case you can hear me now on YouTube, you can or on LinkedIn, you can just help me put a message there, so I know it's working. Okay, I think there's a bit of delay. Okay, so that seems to be working now. All right, thank you. In case you can hear me now, you can or you can link to there's no way I can control it. I can only control it. Okay, so I believe I've been able to sort it. So just I still need like a minute just to grab my charger. I will be back. Just give me like a minute. Yep. Nice. Yeah, so I'm so sorry. It took me a while. I think we can just go now without a break. Okay, so I'm so sorry, like I said. Please confirm you can still hear me so that I can just go ahead. All right, thank you. So good. So now we're talking about the management group. Still talking about the hierarchy. I know I explained this last week. I might not be giving you the in-depth like, oh, okay, we have 10,000 management groups, supported within Azure, which is what we're still going to be talking about when we start the Azure, administrator class. We're still going to talk about all this in depth, So you can say, but what is the reason behind having this hierarchy? It's just like, when it comes to, there are a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is the management of roles and permissions. Now, in case I want to have permission on this particular app service here, or this particular virtual network here, I do not need to assign, and I still need access to maybe the resource group, or let's even say I need access to all these resources here. I do not need to start assigning roles to myself on each of these resources. I can just assign a role on the management group, and I will be able to manage the subscriptions, the resource group, and the like. So we'll talk about this in depth, but for now, what we are going to be looking at is just who the hierarchy for now. So you can see the hierarchy. We have the management group, then under the management group we have the subscription, then under the subscription we have the resource group, and within the resource group is where we have our resources. Okay, so like I said, next week is when we have we'll be creating all these labs. We'll be going to all these labs one after the other. We have 6 labs or 7, I can't remember, in Azure Administrator, Azure Fundamental course, and we're going to be going to all these labs, and you can see these are things we'll just be looking at. I've recorded or created these videos for all these labs. If you want to check it on my YouTube, that's fine, so that you know what we are going to be going to next week. Theo, Ochanya, at any point in time, if you want to add anything, just let me know, or you can just unmute your mic and just add whatever you need to add. So let's move on away from the architecture and let's start with what we have for today. We're going to be talking about compute and networking. So what are resources under compute? What are resources under networking? I'm not going to be defining what a network is, but because we are just starting, because we have people that are not, that are just transitioning into tech also, I'm going to define it, but I'm just going to give you an instance. So this just talks about what are some of the resources that we have on our compute, what are some of the resources we're going to be talking about under networking. But you do not really need to worry yourself about the names for now. You do not need to worry yourself about how they work, but we'll still get there. Networking, we know that connection of 2 resources together, in having it in mind that we want to share maybe data between them, that's what we refer to as networking. It doesn't have to be we connecting to the internet. It doesn't have to be being able to browse Facebook. That's not just, oh, okay, it's because that's our own definition of, okay, oh, I have network. But if you are connected to that particular router in your house and I'm also connected, then we'll be able to, share resources. We'll be able to share data, between those machines. So, and that's what we refer to as, networking. But what are some of the services that we have, and what are benefits, that we have when leveraging on compute resources, networking resources, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So there are different
compute resources. And when we talk about compute resources, what do we really mean? We are talking about maybe resources that does have operating system. Some of them might not even have operating system and just leverage on. But like I said, most of those resources or the underlying technology for all those resources are actually virtual machines. So it all depends on if you are leveraging on PaaS services, IaaS services, or SaaS. So if you're leveraging on the IaaS, a typical example of IaaS is virtual machine where you have access to, the whole machine. You are able to manage the resource group. You are able to manage like completely everything on that particular machine. This was what we talked about when we were, yeah, given the differences between all these IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So in this context now, as you can see here, where we talk about what are some of the compute type that we have, you can see container instance. Forget about the container instance. You do not need to worry of yourself about what it does, but we're still going to be talking about container instance, the functions, the virtual machine. But I'm just going to give you like a description or an example so that you understand what this does. So virtual machine, we all know what virtual machine is now. That your laptop that you currently own, but you do not have access to that physical laptop anymore. You don't have access to that physical desktop anymore, but you can still access it. Download your applications on there. Just use it, but you need another device to be able to connect to that device, and that's what we refer to as virtual machine. So before you can actually leverage on a virtual machine, you need another device, a physical device, be it your phone, be it your system, which you are going to be using to connect to that particular machine, and that's what we refer to as a virtual machine. And I will show you. I think I have one. It's just the same instance that we have, and to spin up a virtual machine in the cloud is so easy, just like you learning 1 2 3. Now, when we talk about the container instance, like I said, you might want to just pretend as if you did not see it, but let me explain what this does. So this is a PaaS service. You are only giving access to where you can actually, upload your container. So I will put it that way. So we have container instance, but so what are containers? We'll be talking about those ones, but for now, just know that container instance is actually a PaaS service. Not like IaaS, not like a virtual machine, but it is used for hosting applications. So that's it. The same thing goes with functions. I'm so sure for some of us that have been in tech but maybe not doing cloud before, or that have been doing different type of not cloud engineering but tech also, or even some of us maybe randomly where we were watching one YouTube movie or something, we heard about what we call serverless hosting. In this case, when we talk about we hosting application, what we do is we are just hosting the file. It's not as if when we talk about, oh, I'm hosting a web application, it's not as if we package the application and just say, oh, we are running that application, then you can access it. So all this website that you go to, since I said, you might not be hearing me talking about website, I would call it web application. So when you hear me say web app or web application, I'm still referring to that google.com website that you know. So when I say, oh, web app, oh, so just know it's still web application. So it's not just some technical jargon so that, we make ourselves so important. That's why, we've made it that way. So the web app, and so when we talk about the functions now, they are serverless computing. What we are saying is we do not want to host the file. We do not want to, host or package the application into a container and host it. No, we only want to host the code. So just bring your code. Would sort the rest. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to just bring your code. So when we talk about serverless application, we are talking about functions in Azure. So, but like I said, you don't really need to worry yourself about all these service type of service for now. We are still going to be explaining as we progress. So um, that's that. We have different type of virtual machine options. I just talked about the virtual machine. You all understand what virtual machines are now, but there are different types of virtual machine options. We have what we call the virtual machine itself, which we understand now that okay, let's say I have a device somewhere, I don't have access to it, so it's going to be virtual. Just the same way, let's say you forgot your system in your friend's place, and there is a need for you to maybe take out a particular file out from it, then you now use your own system in a different location. Maybe you are in the UK, your system is in Nigeria, you are now connecting to it. That your system in Nigeria is going to be virtual at that particular time because you don't have access to that physical device anymore. So you are connecting from a different device to that particular device. It's going to be virtual at that particular time. So that's just the concept of virtual machine. Now, um, we have what we call the virtual machine skill set. So it's just the skill set that we've added to this one. So what we are saying is instead of you creating just one virtual machine, we can have like a reserved instance for you. We can have you saying, oh, I gave an example of JAMB when we used to write those JAMB exams, and they say, oh, the JAMB web application is so slow, we are not even able to access our result because the result was actually released yesterday and a lot of people are trying to access their result. Because the traffic going into that particular server, which was hosting the JAMB website at that particular time, cannot cater for those requests at the same time, then it will keep dragging. The same thing when we have lot of things open on our system or on our phone. We'll say, oh, this is not really working, and the advice will be, oh, can you just restart your system? Can you restart your phone? It's just to free up those services that are running, maybe on the background or something. So you free them up, then that particular machine will come back to life. So that's the same thing. But in this case now, we are saying we have an application that we've hosted on a virtual machine, but we are saying because at the time we'll release this particular JAMB result, a lot of people will be trying to access the result at the same time. And this system alone cannot cater for this traffic. Why not have like a backup somewhere? But we are not just going to have this backup running. We can just have like a set of machines, that are going to, or let's say they are going to share this traffic when they keep increasing. So when you create a virtual machine skill set, you can actually monitor, you can actually indicate the number of virtual machine that will be in that pool. So it's just like a pool of machine, but you can make sure that they are not running at the same time, only or except when they are needed. So you have it as a backup, they will come up when they are needed, when there is a need for them. So we have the virtual machine as against when you have just one machine and when the traffic coming in, it cannot cater for it, the system will start dragging. But when you have virtual machine scale set and the traffic coming into one of those machines is going up than expected, then another machine will be created for you. Then the traffic will now be divided by those two machines. If the traffic keeps increasing, another machine will be created for you based on the condition that we've set up. So we're going to be looking at those conditions. You know what those conditions are referred to. You know how we do that. But for now, let's take example CPU usage or storage usage. The same way you use your storage on your iPhone, you say, oh, I cannot use 128 gig because even with the one I'm actually using now, I've actually consumed like 100. And that's the way we can say, okay, when it gets to 100, please create, another iPhone for this person. So that now what will now happen is you've consumed 100 on this particular iPhone, you've created another iPhone, or yeah, just put it that way. Then we now divide those data into two and say, okay, this takes 50, this takes 50. And that's the same way, the virtual machine skill set, actually works. Now, we have what we call the virtual machine availability set. This also, we are going to be, explaining this. But when we hear availability set, this is more like the availability zone. But in this case, this is happening within one data center. This is happening, within one data center. So it's just a way to make sure our virtual machine is always available. And how does this happen? We have what we call, there are two metrics to this though. We have what we call, what's it again? Huh? Yes, we have what we call the fault domains and the update domains, which we are going to be explaining. So forget about the jargons. When we get there, we'll explain it. Then the last one, the Azure Virtual Desktop. This is what we call the AVD for short. And the way this works is you will only have access to applications that you use on that particular laptop or that particular machine. Instead of giving you the old machine now, we only want to give you access to the applications that you use, so we will create what we call an AVD environment for you, and we'll make available only applications that you need. That's the job of the AVD. So you access it just the same way we access the normal virtual machine, but the only thing you have access to will be, the applications that are needed, or you require. So we describe the resource required for virtual machines. We talk about some application hosting, as you can see here, web app, which is the website that we know, containers, virtual machine itself, and from there we'll move on to virtual networking, where we'll talk about virtual network itself. So we've talked about what networking is, which is interconnection of two devices together. Bearing it in mind that we want them to, maybe communicate or share, data, and that's what we refer to as network. But now we are not talking about the network; we are talking about the virtual network, because we don't have access to those physical infrastructures, anymore. We don't have access to the cable. We don't have access to the router, to the switch, patch panel for people that are actually in networking, so they would know all those devices. We don't have access to it. At least, even for us that are not, at least we all use, we all have like Wi-Fi in our homes, So those Wi-Fi's, they are only made possible. Those connections are only made possible because there are people working at the back end. What we just have is just like virtual. We don't have access to what's actually making that to work. So we, a lot of things are actually happening at the back end. So lots of options, virtual machine, virtual subnet. So when we talk about subnet, we are talking about networking, but we are saying this particular network, we want to divide it into chunks. So when we divide our network into chunks, that's what we refer to as subnet. So when you hear subnetting, that's what we're talking about. Peering, I think someone talked about peering the other time, where let's say we have, because when you create a network, what you've created is an isolated environment. What you've created is an isolated environment. Let's say you create a network in house A, people in house B will not be able to access the network, except when you now connect those two networks together. Then that means devices in building A will be able to access devices in building B. So, and that's what we refer to as peering. So we pair two networks together, so that devices in those two networks can actually intercommunicate, or it can actually communicate with each other. We talk about DNS, Azure DNS. Forget this, but let me just give you what the DNS does. We all know when we go on there, we just type google.com because google.com is something we can always remember. But one thing I need you to know today is for every domain that you put in there on the internet, there is actually hosted, there is like a web application for that particular domain. And that website is hosted on a server. So the computer doesn't understand English, it doesn't understand google.com. The computer only understand 0 and 1, which we call the beats. So you would hear, that's why we have 01 01. That's all the computer. Well, that's what the computer understands. So how do we now have? You are now saying, oh, google.com is hosted on a server. The server will only have the server name, which is the server IP addresses. Just like the same way your phone, when it's connected to the network, there will be an IP address for that particular phone. It might be 192.168.0.25. That's the same way that particular virtual machine where you are hosting your application or your website, that's the same IP address is going to have. Now, if you type in that particular IP address, that particular IP address, which is 192.168.0.25, you are still going to get to google.com. And when you type google.com also, you are still going to get to google.com. I don't know, you can look up the IP address for google.com, but like I said, it's something we're still going to be talking about. I just want to explain what this does. So now we need a technology to map the IP address of that particular server where google.com is being hosted to that domain, google.com. And what does this is the DNS. So we have what we call the domain name system. So that's when we decide when we design a website, we put it on there. We say, oh, go and buy a custom domain, babafemi.com, bulugbe.com. Then we'll now map it to the web hosting. What they do is they just map that particular domain to a server. So, and that server comes with an IP address. So, like I said, computer only understand 0 and 1. It only understand that IP address and not, the domain name that we've bought. It doesn't understand the google.com. So we need to have something to translate that email, that google.com, that domain, back to 0 and 1 for that computer. So the domain name system does that using some nice protocols, but I'm not going to be explaining that now, but we'll get there. VPN gateway. Now, I'm so sure everyone at some point you've actually leveraged on VPN. Maybe some Nigerian movie lovers say, oh, this movie is on Netflix. I'm in the UK, and it's only showing in Nigeria. Then what we do is we'll get some VPN, which we call the virtual private network. We get what we call the VPN, and so that we can actually connect to Nigeria. And what that does is it takes you away from where you are and it connects you, to the Nigerian network. Now, what Netflix is going to be seeing is a system that resides in Nigeria at that particular time, because you are actually on VPN, and that's the same thing. So we can create like a VPN in Azure also. And why do we need this VPN? They are not for movies. So what we are saying is, because when you create a network in Azure, it's going to be an isolated environment. Only devices within that particular network will be able to communicate. And we have a system. I work from home, as let's say like a DevOps engineer, and I need to access, a machine, a virtual machine. I need to access a database in our environment. How do I now connect my physical system to that particular database that resides in Azure? And even when we've said, only system within that particular network can connect together. So we can leverage on what we call the Azure VPN. I can install the client, the agent on my system so that I'm able to connect to the network created in Azure. So just the same way we have the VPN working on our system when we want to go watch a movie on Netflix. That's the same way things works in Azure also, but we'll get there. Then the last one, yeah, when we're talking about some of the virtual machine, virtual network services is spread out. This is also like VPN, but see this as a premium VPN. This. So the only difference between these is, when you have a VPN, you still need like a network to be able to connect to the VPN. But for this one, you don't have to go over the internet. But see the express route for now as an advanced VPN. So the last one will now be public private endpoint. I'm so sure we've actually, explained, or you guys understand what public and private means. Now, when we talk about the endpoints, so we are talking about, okay, let's say this website, google.com, that's actually like an endpoint to access google.com. You understand? Now, if we have something public, is public facing. If we have like an application which is private facing, which is private, that means if it's private, it's only restricted to some people. But if it's public, it's actually available on the internet. So we'll talk about that also. So if you have any question at any point in time, please let me know. This is talking about some Azure compute services that we have. We just talked about the fact that compute services, the underlying technology is still machine, is still virtual machine. All these other ones you can see, app services, container instances, Azure Virtual Desktop, Kubernetes service, everything are still on the virtual machine. But now they are PaaS services. We do not have access to the machine itself. We do not manage, the operating system on the machine. We do not do the patching on the virtual machine. We only said we need like a platform where we can host our application, where we can host our container, and these ones, just pretend as if you're not seeing them for now, But this is the advanced way of hosting applications, So when we host an application now, we don't just put those applications in or those websites, we wrap them and put them into what we call a container, and we host the container. But for now, just have the knowledge that these are just PaaS services. So this talks about the virtual machine. I've explained this. I'm not sure we should dwell on this so much. We talked about the virtual machine as an emulation of our physical computer, just like our physical computer that is just somewhere, but we need to access it over the internet. Shaun, in case maybe it's best for you, might just unmute and if that would be okay. If not, yeah, you can continue typing. So we talked about the virtual machine skill set, which is set of virtual machine that actually load balance automatically. So we talk about what we call scaling. We say, we scale out, we scale in. We do horizontal scaling, or vertical scaling. So what do you mean by PaaS services? PaaS services. What do we mean by PaaS services? Sam. Don't worry. I'll call it out well now. PaaS. Okay, so we have virtual machine skill set. I just talked about this, talking about the fact that instead of just having one virtual machine? Why not have a machine that can scale out? When there is a need for it. Let's say the first time Jumia tried to do the Black Friday, their web application went down. Though it went down for some minutes, it wasn't accessible for some other minutes also, and just because the server that was hosting that particular web application could not cater for the traffic that was coming in at that time. So if they were leveraging on cloud, they can just scale out that particular. And when you scale out, we are saying you create additional resources, additional virtual machine. When you scale in, you lower the number of virtual machines you've created. So we'll still start talking about what we call, we have two types of scaling. We'll talk about horizontal scaling, we'll talk about vertical scaling. So when we talk about horizontal scaling, you all know that, is horizontal, is going out. So that's where we'll start talking about scaling out, scaling back in. But when we talk about the vertical scaling, we will talk about scale up, scale down. So when we scale up, let's say you have, a machine that has 128 gig of disk space, and you say, oh, this machine, I've consumed 120 gig. Can I add, additional hard drive, of 128 gigs so that it can go all the way to 256. So that means we are scaling up, and we can scale down if there is no need for it anymore. So when we talk about scaling up and down, or doing a vertical scaling, we are just adding more power to that particular machine. It's still one machine. We are just adding more compute power to it. But when you scale out or scale back in, where we talk about the horizontal scaling, we are adding additional resource. We are increasing the number of resource. So we are going to, but virtual machine scales out. It doesn't scale up and down. It scale out and scale in. So virtual machine scale set works with what we call the horizontal scaling. So it's scaled out by adding additional resource, and not just compute power now. So we talked about the virtual machine already. So let's say Jumia was leveraging on virtual machine scale set. What will happen is, as the traffic is increasing, based on the metrics that we've configured within the rule, saying, oh, if this traffic gets to 80%, if the CPU usage of this particular machine gets up to 90%, if the disk space, like I've actually explained, let's say I bought or I created a Google account. They gave me 15 gig of Google Drive access, and I've consumed 14.7. At that point in time, what will I do? Is either I start deleting, or I just say, oh, I'm just going to buy additional 15 gig so that it scales out to like 30 gig. So we can or let me just go and create additional or another Google account, and it gives me another 15. In that case, what you've done is you've done like an horizontal scaling. You've created an horizontal scaling. You've bought you've created additional Google Drive. But if you pay and they scale you up to 30, what you've done is you've added compute power to that Google Drive, and that's what I'm just trying to explain here. But virtual machine scale sets, it scales out. It doesn't scale up and down. Availability sets, I talked about this the other time, saying we are talking about the same data center now, not availability zones. When we talk about availability zones, we are saying, oh, I want my service to be in different data centers, or even when they are actually in different data centers, they must be in different zones. And I've given you an example of some of the zones that we might have if, let's say, Nigeria is a region. But when we talk about availability set, we are referring to how to make our virtual machine or our resource available, every time, even though it's just in a data center. So when we talk about availability set, when you go into your staff, IT room, they tell you, oh, this rack of server, rack of server, that means we have multiple servers just arranged together on one particular rack, So all those machines on that same rack, they would be using just one power source. So that means if you go to the back of let's say we have 16 machines arranged on one rack, and you go back to the back of that particular rack and you pull out the power source, all those 16 machines will go down. Now, that doesn't make sense. Let's say you have your virtual machine built in server 1, then server 16 on the same rack. If I go to the back of that particular rack and I take out that particular power source, your machine would not be available because that domain, that fourth domain is not available to you again. That rack is not available. So what we do is, on a different rack, let's have your infrastructure replicated to a server on a different rack. So let's say we have 300 racks within our data center. Your machine or your infrastructure that you've created might be on rack 1, rack 57, and rack 200. Meaning there is no way anyone, except if you are just the target and they go in and pull out the cables for those specific rack. So we'll talk about fault domains and update domains when we are talking about availability set. So machines that are actually on the same rack are referred to as fault domains. But machines that are updated and restarted at the same time are referred to as update domains. Update domain. So, and based on the rule in Azure is no two fault domains and no two update domains are going to be restarted at the same time. So that means if you have your infrastructure in fault domain 0, as you can see, and you have your infrastructure on fault domain 1, those machines are not going to be restarted together at the same time. So that means your machine is always available. So when we talk about availability set, just know that we are talking about replicating our infrastructure on different or within different servers on different racks, and there is no way we'll talk about availability set where we'll not talk about the update domain and fault domain. We'll still get to where we'll describe those two metrics. So this is just talking about availability set. Create virtual machine, install server package. This is part of the labs we're going to be doing. Virtual desktop, I explained this the other time also, but the main thing when it comes to AVD is to make sure that only applications that you need are made available to you. So what we do is, instead of giving you access to, so we just employ someone from the US, and we feel like, oh, you do not need to be, accessing our infrastructure, using your own physical system. Don't worry, we'll create like an environment for you, which you can connect to, and from there you'll be able to access our environment. So we create, like an AVD environment for you, and we add those specific apps that you need. We are not going to give you full access to the virtual machine where you can start installing your own apps. No, we'll only create like an environment for you where you can actually log into and access only applications that is needed for you to complete your day-to-day job. So that's what we do with AVD. So for now, take it like that. Container instance, I think I will not be able to run away from this. I'm just going to explain this. So you just need to relate with me. Back in the days when web application hosting, started, so what people do is they get servers and they host an application per server. So that means if I want to host 20 applications, I would need 20 servers. So imagine those servers that we buy. Let's not even talk about servers now. Let's even say you are hosting that application on your system. Your system has 1 terabyte space. It has 16 gig of RAM. And imagine you are just hosting a calendar application or a calculator application on that server. What's going on is you're wasting a lot of resources because the calculator or calendar is not going to consume anything or any of those space. So but why are we not hosting like multiple application per server? Because there might be an application that is consuming every resources within that particular server that will not allow the other application to run well. So that's why people started hosting one application, on one server. That means they were doing one application per server. Then came what we call virtualization. You know, Microsoft came with what we call the virtualization. So on your system, what you can now do is you can create virtual machine on those servers then, and those virtual machines, they are just like we explained that they are just emulation of your physical machine. So if you create a virtual machine on your laptop or on your server, what will happen is you need to divide the resources on your machine. Let's say you have 15 gig or 16 gig of RAM. You might say, oh, I'm going to allocate 4 gig of RAM from my machine to that particular server, so that particular virtual machine I'm creating on my laptop. Then this 1 terabyte space, I'm going to give this 250 gig out of the 1 terabyte space. So then, instead of hosting one application on your server, now you can now virtualize that particular server and have, let's say, 4 virtual machines. So those virtual machines is just like you having your machine, but what you've done is you can now have multiple machines on one server. So you don't need to buy additional server when you want to host an application. So let's say you have 4 virtual machines, then you have on each of those virtual machines you can only host one application each. So if you have 4 virtual machines running on that particular server, then you have 4 applications, which was still better than the days where we have just one application to. A very typical example would be the what's this thing? Somebody asked me questions related to it the first day. VMware, you understand, which gives you access to be able to host or create virtual machines on your own laptop. Do you understand? But you're still going to be consuming space on that particular laptop. So that was how people were able to host more than one application. Now we've seen cloud services provide you with virtual machines also, or they've created technologies that would allow you to host multiple servers. A very good example would be the Apache. A very good example also would be the IIS, which you can actually install and start having multiple applications on one particular server. But what if when a developer creates an application and the developer created the application on his own Mac laptop and you are using Windows? When you try to run the application, you might not be able to do so because maybe because of change of environment, change of operating system, and you just feel like, oh, this is not working, and you said it was working, and it's showing you this is working on my own laptop. I don't know why it's not working on yours. Oh, maybe because I'm using Windows, because application don't just run. There are some other things that are needed, which we call application dependencies, that are needed to make that application run. What if we have all these dependencies and all the application code in just one place? Instead of saying, oh, I'm using Windows, let's package everything. All the variables, the environment variables, dependencies, the application script, let's package it and put it somewhere. And that is where the container technology came into play. So when you start hearing container, just know that what we're talking about is just a lightweight virtualized environment, which allow us to run an application regardless of where it's being built, because we've packaged everything that is needed for that application to run into what we call a container. So we have services in Azure that will allow us to run that kind of application. So it might not be too clear now. Do you understand? Because this particular topic I'm explaining, it's what we're going to be talking about when we get to Azure DevOps. I'm not even talking about Azure Administrator now, because these are what we use in deploying our application. But at least just an understanding of what the technology means. I was trying to shy away from it, but it looks like I needed to explain it. So you can see we have the Azure container instance for running this particular application. We have the container apps itself, just like the instance, but it can load balance and scale. Do you understand? Then we have the Kubernetes service. Imagine having thousands of this container I was talking about. How do we make sure that we are able to monitor all those containers? So we need a service that will help us to manage, that large volume of containers. And that's where the AKS comes in. So if you have been hearing Kubernetes, that is what it does. It's not so special. And this was the serverless compute I talked about, serverless service I talked about. Instead of you hosting your application file the same way we host application, why not just bring your code? Just bring your code. Don't build any file. Don't build your application. Just bring the code. We'll host it. So that's what we refer to as serverless. In case you've heard of serverless applications before. So in Azure, you can host your serverless application on Azure Function. This just comparing those compute options that we've talked about. Talking about the virtual machine, virtual desktop, the container itself. So in case you have any question at any point in time. Ochanya, should you have anything to add at any point in time, please do let me know. And you can just unmute yourself and talk. Yeah. Yep. So I've been talking about google.com, and I said, to me, it's not a website, it's a web application. So in Azure, there's something we call the app services, which we use in hosting this web application. It's a platform as a service resource, and which we call PaaS. Before Sam will come and get me and say, I'm calling Pa. So it's a PaaS service, in Azure that is used in hosting our application, So as you can see, it works with different programming languages. We have the .NET Core, Node.js, Java, Python. These are just something to frighten us, but don't worry. You don't have to worry yourself about all these jargons that I'm listing out. But at least what we are concerned about here is what does app service does. It's just used, is a platform for building, deploying, and scaling our web application and APIs. I just explained what web app is, that website. But what are APIs? Anybody? What do you understand as API? I need someone to talk, or else I'll pick people out. Have anyone heard of API before? Don't worry, I will not pick you. Just let me know. Have you heard about API? Or you've heard of APS? Yeah. So they use those jargons and say API. But I'm just going to I'm not going to explain what an API is, but I'm going to give you like an analogy and you will understand it. When for people staying in the UK or US, when you try to send money home and you're using LearnFi, you put in LearnFi, you log into LearnFi, and from LearnFi, it takes you to your Revolut if you have selected Revolut. LearnFi doesn't have that connection ready with Revolut. It's just an API that is connecting Revolut and LearnFi together, and that's why that communication can happen. Do you understand? So when you click on Revolut, it takes you to Revolut. You put in everything, then it takes you back. Or you go to that's a typical example though. I'm just trying to see what else. Or let's say yes, on booking.com for people that fly a lot, or hotels.com, when you go to booking.com, you want to buy like a ticket from Senegal to Nigeria. And what is going to happen is this guy is just going to bring out options for you. Air Maroc, Earpiece, Air France, which one you want to buy. And when you pick the Earpiece, it just takes you directly to Earpiece website. It might not even take you directly to Earpiece website. It might tell you complete this process, but there is a connection between the Earpiece website and booking.com. So what does the connection? In between is what we have the API. So it's an interface, between one web application and the other. Does that make sense? There are no people in this class. Oh my word. All right. I'm even proud of you guys, even if you did not say anything. Now, moving away from that, let's start talking about Azure Networking Services. Now, Azure Networking Services, I explained the other time that, hold on, I keep hearing myself. Just give me a minute. Is anyone on mute? Okay. Yep, I think it's better now. Okay, so we'll talk about Azure Networking Services. I've explained network or let's say network as service that is that enables you to be able to, or enables devices to be able to communicate with each other. Now, it doesn't have to be communication to the internet. It doesn't have to be communication that will allow me to access a web application. No. Once there are two devices, that are connected together, those devices can share resources. Let's say I connect my phone to my system and I'm able to pull out or download resources from my phone, drag it down to Google, to my my system. Then that's I've network. What actually make that happen is the network I've created. It's not you having your WhatsApp on your phone and having it on your system and you're sending. That's not that's not what I'm talking. Even at that, maybe at least you are able to, but That's not really what I'm talking about. So you can have your network, when you have two devices connected together, and those devices are able to share resources between each other, we refer to that, what you've done, or as network. So now we're going to be talking about the virtual part of it, which is the Azure Virtual Network, and that's why we refer to it as VNet instead of net or network. So Azure Virtual Network enables Azure resources. So you take note of that, Azure resources to communicate with each other, to communicate with internet, or even communicate with on-premises devices via the on-premises network. So what are we going to be looking about? We're talking about. We are going to be talking about public endpoints, and when we talk about the public, we are just saying something accessible on the internet. That's when we start talking about. I'm so sure within in the Azure Administrator course, we start talking about public application, private app. Now when we talk about anything public, we are just saying this is accessible from anywhere on the internet. But anything private, I gave an example: internet, intranet. Intranet is accessible within your network. Is only accessible by a specific some specific persons or people, and not like the internet, which is accessible to all. Then we'll talk about the virtual network. It's virtual networking, virtual subnetting, which I said you dividing your network into chunks, and we refer to it as subnetting. So for people, maybe you've tried or you've done TCNA in the past, and they say, oh, one of the most difficult topic is subnetting. There is nothing happening there. It's just we dividing our network into chunks, and that's just it. And the last one will be the network peering, which Isi was explaining the other time, which allows, we just said when you create your virtual network, only allows, resources within that particular network to communicate. But if there is a need for you to communicate with devices that are deployed in another network, it might even be in another organization, all we need is what we call the network peering. So this network peering allows us to connect those private network together. Network work too, we'll still go through that also. I thought about the VPN. We don't need to overflow these, but at least for now, you understand what the VPN does. You understand what it's used for. This just explaining the VPN gateway, what makes it a bit, So when we talk about VPN, there is a service in Azure which we refer to as the VPN gateway. This is what makes, that communication happen or happens in Azure. So when you have the VPN gateway deployed, it's actually like the connecting services from your Azure environment to your on-premises. When we create a VPN in Azure or in the cloud, we are not looking at, having network or virtual machine within that cloud environment communicate with each other. No, we are trying to extend this to an on-premise device. So let's say I want to use my machine to be able to access a virtual machine in Azure, and that virtual machine doesn't have a public IP address. I need something that will be on the same network as that particular machine that is in Azure. So I need what we call the VPN. So just the same way you use this for Netflix, where you are going back to connect to Azure, to Nigeria. And what Netflix does is it sees that particular system or that particular TV or that particular phone that you're connecting with as, a device that resides in that location. So what will happen is it gives you access based on that, and that's the same way. So you can see VPN gateway is used to send encrypted traffic between an Azure virtual network and an on-premise location over the public internet. And this is the only difference as to when we deploy what we call the express route. So when you deploy a VPN, we still have to go over the public internet. So if you buy your VPN now, you still need the internet to be able to connect to that VPN, and that's what this is also saying. But when you leverage on the express route, which we are going to be seeing, I think, in a couple of seconds now, you know, we do not connect over the internet. So there is a backbone communication with Azure, but we don't need to really worry about that for now. So just understand what the VPN does, and you know that for this to be able to be available, we need a device called, like a service in Azure called the VPN gateway that makes this happen. This was the express route I was talking about, and you can see the only difference is it's connecting over a private connection. We are not connecting over the internet, so it's still extending that particular communication to your own premises from Azure, but now we're not connecting over a public internet or to the internet. We are just connecting. So there is this backbone communication from Azure to your network that makes it happening. Very expensive, and it's only meant for the big guys. So DNS, I thought about this also. I'm so sure we understand this. I've told you, when you have google.com, computer doesn't understand the google.com. You only understand the IP address, the 0 and 1. And you can see the IP address when you have 21.95. All those ones are still going to be, for computer to understand it, they are still going to be chunks into what we call a bit and byte, the 0 and 1. So, what makes the conversion of that particular IP address to google.com that we understand, which is more of English, and what converts that google.com also to what the computer understands. This service in between is the DNS. It does a lot more than that, but at least this is something you might want to just know for now. As we progress, we're still going to be talking about this. It uses protocols. If I start explaining those things, it might go over. But so let's just take it that way now. But for now, at least you have that basic understanding of what's going on, how that conversion is done, what does the conversion, for now. All right. We still have a lot of things. I'm not so sure. Wow. Fundamental is taking like all the time. Okay, so I don't know if we should continue or we should stop here or just go to the storage. Anyone suggestion? Because we have just 10 minutes to go. I want to give you guys time to be able to ask your questions. If you have any question you want to ask. Okay, so I think I will just let you guys go for now. Maybe for the course of this fundamental, we might not just rush this. Yeah, we might not just rush this. We have a lot of ups and downs today. My network wasn't connecting. I had to go pick my. So for now, I think we can stop this here for now. So if you have any question, please do let me know. And that is why you guys are joining these teams. If it's just me trying to, just be here without you, joining or asking questions, I would have invited all you guys to, maybe the LinkedIn environment or, or the team. So, and one of the reasons why I've sent out this link is for you guys to be able to ask questions if need be, But if there are no questions, yeah, I'm not going to, take it, against you guys. But I would try as much as possible. Just um, make sure you following. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I don't know, or the YouTube environment, or even the link I've posted. If you guys still have the link, the GitHub link, put an eye on it. Today I'm just going to update all those resources in there so that you also can. Yeah, I'm always posting this on YouTube because it's streaming live on YouTube. So after this particular class, it's just going to automatically upload to YouTube also. So if you follow me on YouTube, follow me on LinkedIn, or or even you have this GitHub environment, please, I would post everything. So one thing I would also do, I think that is what I need to do. I think I should just invite you guys to my Slack, and it will make it possible. Yes, thank you, Sam. Just follow that link. I know some people are actually on my Slack already, but I think I would. What I would just do is just to create the Slack for you guys. I've got the Slack. I will just invite you guys to that Slack environment so that if I have any information to upload or any time to tell you, anything to tell you guys, I will just drop it on the Slack. I know a lot of people were not using it, and we later had to uh, revert back to WhatsApp, but I don't want to do WhatsApp this time. I have so many numbers already on my phone, so I'll just continue using the Slack. And I will invite you guys there so that in case you guys have questions you want to ask me privately also, that's possible. Yes, it's possible to add me on WhatsApp. Who am I? That I cannot release my WhatsApp environment. It's always possible. Yeah. So, all right. If there are no questions, I would stop here, and we connect again next week Saturday. So unfortunately we might not be having our practical section on Saturday, the coming Saturday, based on the fact that we still have some things to go through. I want to finish up with everything. I've got so many numbers, but I think the one that will make more sense. Yeah, I would send out the link to the last one. Let me just even do it now so that I don't procrastinate. But to make things easy, if you're seeing this now, you can see what you just need to do. I'm so sure I've done this, but on the YouTube, maybe I should just go and change my YouTube username. So we have youtube.com/at tech talk with Baba Femi. So if you just search for Tech Talk with Baba Femi on YouTube, you should be able to see me, and it takes you directly to my YouTube channel. So this is happening live now. Like I said, it's going to be uploaded immediately. But the last one we had was this particular one. And just going to copy the link for people that were not in class last week. Okay. You want me to go in? Copy. Yep. And I'm going to paste this there. So it should, in case you want to. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, that's fine. So, yep. So if you are looking at chatting me on WhatsApp, you can do that from there. Then I can just invite you to, wherever we need to invite you to something. So that's it.